Coming up on Network Africa. Turkey evacuates those injured in Saturday's deadly blast in Mogadishu. One person killed in the latest airstrike in Libya. Plus, vote counting underway in Guinea-Bissau after Sunday's election. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin this week with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
Opened in Guinea-Bissau on Sunday as two former prime ministers went head-to-head in the presidential election runoff, both promising to bring stability to the turbulent West African nation. The incumbent president, Jose Mario Vaz, has failed to make the second round of voting after a 5-year term met weeks of turmoil in the run-up to the first vote. That's left the ruling PIGC party's Domingo Simons Pereira and his opponent Umaru Sissoko Embalo in the frame. Pereira won the first round with 40% of the vote, while Embalo, a brigadier general, came second with 28%. Analysts say the runoff could be close, and Embalo has won support from main contenders who failed to reach the runoff, including Vaz. Algeria's President Abdelmadjid Tebboune named former diplomat Abdelaziz Jarrad as Prime Minister on Saturday in the next phase of building a new government to handle the political unrest. The 65-year-old university professor served in the administration of a previous president in the 1990s, but was sidelined by ousted President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. Other members of the new government are expected to be named in the coming days. At least 76 people were killed by a vehicle bomb detonated during morning rush hour in Somalia's capital on Saturday. The blast took place at a checkpoint at a busy intersection in Mogadishu. More than 90 people were also injured. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the bomb, but Al-Shabaab militants have often struck there. President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo said its aim was to demoralize the Somali people, but that jihadists will never stop the country from rebuilding.
Cari fratelli e sorelle.
Pope Francis on Sunday prayed for the victims of the car bombing. The attack is the deadliest in war-torn Somalia in more than 2 years.
A Mogadiscio, in Somalia.
3 staff members of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees were abducted in eastern province of South Kivu of the Democratic Republic of Congo on Friday. According to an internal notice by the UN Stabilization Mission, the suspected Mai Mai militia men reportedly attacked the Monge refugee transit camp in the town of Baraka, capturing a Senegalese office assistant and 2 security officers of Congolese nationals. The government force and police have started an investigation. A government official said on Saturday that over 6,000 families in the town of Kisumu in western Kenya had been affected by flooding from heavy rains that began earlier in the week on Christmas Eve. Many local residents said that they had no dry place to sleep and feared the flooding situation could worsen as they appealed for aid. Government agencies responded by urging residents to move as soon as possible to a rescue center set up at a local secondary school. East Africa is experiencing abnormally heavy rains due to the Indian Ocean being warmer than usual. A rhino believed to be the world's oldest passed away on Friday at the age of 57 in Tanzania. According to conservation authorities, the Ngorongoro Conservation Area Authority announced that Haftar, an eastern black rhino living inside the conservation area, had died after a period of declining health. The rhino was first seen in 1965 in the Ngorongoro crater by a scientist from the University of Dar es Salaam and lived there until having to be taken into specialist care.
The U.S. military and Somali forces have hit 2 al-Shabaab trained targets with airstrikes. Somali's government says a senior al-Shabaab member was killed. On Saturday, a truck bomb attack blamed on the armed group in Mogadishu killed over 70 people. On Sunday, a Turkish military cargo plane landed to evacuate people badly wounded, including 2 Turkish nationals. Now, 1 person has been killed after an airstrike hit a residential area of the Libyan town of Tajura, east of the capital, Tripoli. There is no claim of responsibility for the attack, but local officials blame Khalifa Haftar's forces. Meanwhile, Libya's UN-recognized government has accused Haftar's forces of war crimes and is calling on the United Nations and the International Criminal Court to stop the warlords' offensive on Tripoli. The Turkish government says is sending a bill to Parliament today mandating the deployment of troops to Libya. Now, this accelerates the high-stakes plan that Ankara outlined last week. Last week, President Tayyip Erdogan said his government would seek parliamentary consent to deploy troops to Libya after Fayez al-Sarraj's government of national accord requested support. Now, joining us to discuss more on the security situation in Libya is an African affairs analyst, Lester Wilcox. Thank you so much for joining us. The internationally recognized government in Libya is accusing Khalifa Haftar's forces of war crimes, that the international community needs to do more. What will meet the threshold of a war crime in this case?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon. It's obviously clear that when civilian targets are being hit by any side in any conflict, then there are ingredients of a war crime that is looming. A war crime exists where there is torture, there is a civilian casualty, intentional civilian casualty, there is raping, there is a killing of prisoners of war, and other things that are unconventional in a normal warfare. As in things that do not affect the combatants, but affect targets that are not in the day-to-day prosecution of a war. So where private residential areas are being hit by the parties, especially the Caliph faction that is fighting the government of the national government in Libya, I think it is always obvious that a war crime is looming, and it is better that it is being called to order now, because most conflicts in Africa, especially in Africa, do not respect the UN Convention on War. They just go about hitting targets at will. In the case of Libya, this is one hit targets too many that civilian targets have been hit. And so those ingredients of a war crime now exist, for which the international body needs to look into it.
Yeah, there has been criticism of the UN for not doing enough. But then you have Russia supporting Khalifa Haftar's forces, and Russia is a permanent 5 member of the UN Security Council with veto power. Doesn't that make any action here particularly difficult?
Well, yes, it has always been that way, because you will agree with me that Russia, most often than goes the other side where others are going because of pecuniary interest, strategic interest. The Libyan case has been like this for the past. Russia has always been on the other side where the other 4 members choose to. Most times, China abstain, but Russia has always been on the other side of it. So that makes a little bit of a difficulty. But this is not the first case that the UN Security Council have handled. There are a lot of cases that Russia will not go along. I do not understand the strategic interest of Russia in not allowing peace to reign in Libya. I do not understand economic interest. I don't understand strategic interest. There is already a government
It seems quite windy at your end over there, and it's affecting the audio, but we'll have to thank you most kindly for joining us. Lester Wilcox is an African affairs analyst. Moving on to other stories now. The United Nations has sent a rapid response team to the Central African Republic due to fighting between armed groups and shop owners being forced to pay them money. At least 40 people were killed in the capital, Bangui, in the mainly Muslim PK5 district, an area often troubled by violence. The clashes started when shopkeepers fought back against the local militia, which has been trying to force them to pay taxes. Ongoing violence since a rebel group seized power in 2013 has forced more than a quarter of the CAR's 4.7 million people to flee their homes. Now, vote counting is underway in Guinea-Bissau's presidential runoff. Two former prime ministers are competing to replace President José Mario Vaz, who failed to get through the first round last month. African observers say voting went smoothly in the election. However, one candidate, Umaro Sissoko Embalo, is accusing the Interior Ministry of stuffing ballot boxes. The Electoral Commission is expected to announce the provincial results on January the 1st. Now, this year, 2019, saw many political events that shaped the continent. This next report is a retrospective of some of the top events in 2019 that captured headlines coming from South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Cameroon. Foreign business owners were left reeling after their businesses were looted and burnt overnight in the Alexandria township during the latest spate of xenophobic violence in South Africa. At least 80 people were arrested in connection to the attacks. Foreign-owned businesses were plundered and cars and businesses set alight.
You see, look, it's burning all shop, this one. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying, but no, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm scared too much. Yeah. They have to say something, this government, for us.
Gauteng Premier David Makura labels the attacks undemocratic, calling on South Africans to stop the violence.
Are having this xenophobic sentiment underlying this about foreigners having to leave. We are a democracy. We are a democratic society. We can't allow people to take the law into their own hands. There is no country that doesn't have foreign nationals.
In Zimbabwe's second city, Bulawayo, hundreds of police backed by soldiers and army helicopters were deployed in a show of force that stopped the main opposition party from launching an anti-government protest march for the second time in 4 days. The street march in Bulawayo was called by the Movement for Democratic Change as it looks to rally support nationwide against President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government, which it accuses of repression and blames for the country's worst economic crisis in decade. In September, former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe died at the age of 95. Mugabe was forced to step down by the military in November 2017 following nationwide mass protests. He was buried in the courtyard of his home in Kutama, where he was born, 3 weeks after his death. The Mugabe family decided on a private burial in Kutama after weeks of argument with the government. In Cameroon, a national dialogue could have opened the door to an historic peace agreement, ending a fight between English-speaking separatist militia and the army that has cost nearly 2,000 lives, forcing 500,000 people to flee and rule. Instead, it was boycotted by separatists and modern politicians.
And I want to tell you that we invited nearly every one of them. They were invited. Some of them didn't feel comfortable coming for reasons they know best. We wanted them to come and to take part in the discussions. This was a wonderful opportunity for them to come and air their views. They didn't come. But we know that a good number of other persons who are close to them came here. And I've talked to some of them. They are quite happy with the way the dialogue was conducted. They are very happy with the open and frank nature of the discussions.
The insurgency emerged after a heavy-handed government crackdown on peaceful protests late in 2016 in the Anglophone Northwest and Southwest regions by lawyers and teachers who complained of being marginalized by the French-speaking majority. Still to come on the program, we'll show you what it's like to stay in South Africa's Backpackers Lodge this festive season. Please stay with us.